Ever wonder what happens to all those ones and zeros when you swipe your debit card?
Hmm, interesting question.
Today's deep dive isn't about what you see on your banking app. It's about the systems uh, working behind the scenes, the ones most of us don't even think about. We're talking core banking modernization.
Right, and why understanding this matters even if you'd rather not think about it.
Exactly. We're diving into some insights from a banking tech expert, really interesting stuff, starting with this idea that calling these systems legacy might be doing them a disservice. They argue these systems are more like the backbone of banks.
Yeah, the term legacy system can be a bit misleading. Yes, these systems have been around for decades, but they've also evolving all that time, containing years of what we call business logic, which can be tricky. That's not just about old code, it's about the coded instructions for how a bank actually operates.
So it's more than just lines of code. It's like the DNA of a bank.
Exactly. And that's why simply replacing these systems is incredibly risky. Imagine trying to build a house just by looking at a finished one with no blueprints.
Oh, well, yeah.
You might miss crucial structural elements or wiring. It's the same with these core systems. You can't just rip and replace without understanding their business logic.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach either, is it? The expert mentioned two main modernization strategies.
Yeah, there are a few ways to approach this. One is in-place optimization, which is like giving a classic car a modern engine. And some tech upgrades, you keep the essential structure but make it faster and more efficient.
So you're not ditching everything old, you're making strategic upgrades. What's the other approach?
The hybrid approach, this is where you move some functions to the cloud, integrate new tech, but keep some parts of the system on the original platform. A good analogy would be upgrading your home office with the latest gadgets, but keeping the rest of your house as is.
This idea of keeping some of the old while integrating the new, does that apply to other industries as well?
Absolutely. Think about manufacturing, healthcare, even government agencies. They all rely on complex systems that have evolved over time. Modernization in those fields also involves striking a balance between preserving valuable functionality and integrating new technologies. It's not always about starting from scratch.
That brings us to what the expert seemed most concerned about, this idea of we don't know what we don't know.
That's right, and with good reason. These core banking systems are incredibly complex, often with decades of modifications, updates, and workarounds. Documentation might be incomplete or outdated, which can be a real problem.
So you might not even know what's missing until it causes a major issue.
Precisely.
Wow.
Imagine a surgeon operating without a complete understanding of your medical history.
Oh, wow.
That's the level of risk we're talking about here. You can't fix what you don't understand.
Can you give us a real-world example to illustrate just how risky this lack of clarity can be?
Absolutely. Let's say a bank is modernizing its loan processing system, but they overlook a critical piece of code that automatically adjusts interest rates based on market fluctuations.
Okay.
If that piece of code isn't properly migrated or replicated in the new system, it could lead to inaccurate loan rates, costing the bank and potentially its customers a lot of money.
That's a great point. It highlights why you need a deep understanding of these systems before you even think about making changes.
It's like renovating a very old house. You might uncover asbestos, faulty wiring, or even structural damage hidden behind those walls. Those unforeseen problems are costly and time-consuming to fix. The same principle applies to modernizing these core systems.
So before you even think about upgrading, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Luckily, this expert provided us with a sort of checklist to guide this process. They call it a roadmap for understanding the critical components of a core banking system before modernization.
It's a crucial first step in mitigating those unknown unknowns. By systematically assessing these components, banks can uncover potential risks and make more informed decisions about how to approach modernization.
So let's dive into this checklist.
Yeah.
What's the first stop on our deep dive into core systems? So we're cracking open this expert's modernization checklist.
Okay.
And the first item is all about understanding the system's interfaces. To be honest, it doesn't sound that exciting at first glance.
Yeah, I can see how you'd think that, but don't let the term fool you. Understanding a system's interfaces is crucial, really. It's about more than just knowing how many exist. It's about what each interface connects to, how it communicates, and how vital it is for the bank's daily operations.
Okay, so it's like the connections that allow different parts of the system to talk to each other.
Exactly. Think of a bank's payment processing system.
Yeah, yep.
It likely has interfaces connecting it to credit card networks, ATM networks, and maybe even mobile payment platforms. Each interface uses a specific language and protocol to exchange information.
So if you're modernizing the system, you need to know what those languages are and make sure they're compatible with the new technology.
Yeah, you got it. Failing to properly account for these interfaces during modernization could lead to major disruptions in service. Imagine a scenario where ATMs can't process withdrawals, or online payments get declined because the interfaces weren't properly integrated into the new system.
Suddenly, interfaces sound a lot more important. What's next on this modernization checklist?
Data. And it's not just about how much data you have, but how it's organized, secured, and accessed.
Right, because data is the lifeblood of any modern organization, especially banks.
Absolutely. A bank's data is incredibly valuable, but it's also a major target for cyber attacks. When modernizing, you need to make sure data security is paramount.
Right.
Failing to properly migrate data security protocols during modernization could expose banks to a significantly higher risk of cyber attacks, and believe me, those breaches can be costly.
Talk about a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
So data security during migration check. What else do we need to consider?
Storage.
Okay.
We need to map out all types: backups, archives, frequently used data, everything.
Because not all data is created equal, right?
Yeah.
Some of it you need to access constantly. Some of it you might only need once a year.
Exactly. And each type of data has different storage requirements, which directly impact the cost and efficiency of the new system. You don't want to be paying top dollar for lightning fast access to data you only need once a year.
Makes sense. It's about finding the right balance between performance and cost. So we've got interfaces, data, and storage. What's next?
Next up, business functions and rules.
Okay.
This is where we delve into the heart of what the system actually does.
So if the interfaces are how the system communicates, this is the brains of the operation.
That's a good way to put it. This is about understanding all the tasks the system performs, from processing deposits to generating account statements and the intricate rules that govern those tasks. These rules, often embedded deep within the code, are the result of years of experience, regulatory changes, and business decisions.
This sounds like the area where that we don't know what we don't know problem could really come back to bite you.
Absolutely. If these business rules aren't accurately translated to the new system, it can lead to all sorts of problems. For example, if a loan approval process isn't accurately replicated in the new system, it could lead to inaccurate risk assessments and potential financial losses for the bank.
So it's crucial to make sure those rules are understood and properly implemented in the new system. What comes after we've mapped out the brains of the operation?
We need to analyze the source code itself.
Ugh. Source code. The mysterious language of computers. Even the term makes me a little nervous.
Don't worry, you don't need to be a coding whiz to understand why this stuff is important. It's about knowing where the code lives, how it's managed, and whether there are any gaps or inconsistencies that need to be addressed. Think of it like inspecting the foundation of a house.
Okay. Yeah.
You might not be an architect, but you want to make sure it's solid before you start building on top of it.
That's a good analogy. So are we talking about physically combing through mountains of code?
It can be a complex process, but luckily there are tools and techniques available to help analyze large code bases. Think of it more like using specialized scanners to search for potential issues in the foundation of that house, rather than having to inspect every brick by hand.
So we're not just looking for errors, but also for potential vulnerabilities.
Exactly. Outdated code or security loopholes can create significant risks, especially during a modernization project. Identifying these vulnerabilities early on allows for a smoother transition and reduces the chances of unexpected issues cropping up later.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this checklist is so important. It's about uncovering potential problems before they become real headaches. What's next?
Next, we need to look at the technology underpinning the whole system: the user interface, the middleware, the backend systems, everything.
So are we talking about figuring out if we're dealing with a rotary phone or the latest smartphone technology-wise?
That's a great way to put it. Understanding the current technology stack is essential for determining compatibility with a modernized system. We need to know which components can be seamlessly integrated and which ones might need to be replaced or upgraded along the way.
So it's like taking inventory of all the tech before you start renovating.
Exactly. And just like with a home renovation, you might find that some components are outdated and need to be replaced entirely. For example, if a core banking system relies on an outdated operating system, it might be necessary to upgrade to a more modern and secure option during the modernization process.
Okay, so far we've got a pretty good handle on what the system does. What about the infrastructure it runs on?
Excellent question. Infrastructure is next on the checklist. We're talking about the physical and virtual hardware that supports the system.
Mm.
Servers, databases, storage capacity, the whole nine yards.
Essentially the foundation that this whole digital operation is built upon, and we need to make sure it can support a modernized system.
Exactly. It's like constructing a skyscraper on a foundation designed for a two-story building. You need to ensure it can handle the increased weight and complexity. Modernization often requires significant upgrades to infrastructure, so understanding the current state is crucial for planning and budgeting.
And probably avoiding any costly surprises down the road, what comes after infrastructure. This checklist is quite extensive.
It is, but it's better to be thorough than sorry. Next, we need to analyze the non-functional requirements, particularly performance.
Non-functional requirements. Is that like the unsung heroes of the system, the things we don't always see but are crucial for everything to work smoothly?
Precisely. It's not about what the system does, but how well it does it. How many transactions can it process per second? How quickly does it respond to requests, especially during peak hours? These are critical considerations for a modern banking system.
So how do you measure the performance of a system that might be decades old?
It involves looking at things like performance test cases, historical transaction volumes, and how the system has performed under peak load in the past. We need to understand its limits and identify potential bottlenecks.
Because a slow and unreliable system can be just as frustrating for customers as no system at all.
Absolutely. In today's digital world, people expect instant gratification and seamless experiences. A modern banking system needs to be able to keep up with those expectations.
That makes sense. So we've covered the technical aspects of the system, the infrastructure, the performance. What else is on this deep dive checklist?
Next up is access control and security.
Now, that's a topic that's always top of mind these days. What are some of the key things to consider when it comes to security during modernization?
We need to understand who has access to what, how passwords are managed, and identify any potential vulnerabilities. And it's not just about external threats. Internal security is just as crucial.
Right.
We need to make sure that only authorized personnel have access to sensitive data and that those access controls are properly migrated to the new system.
Right. It's like changing the locks when you move into a new house.
Yeah.
You want to make sure the only people with keys are the ones who are supposed to be there. What's next on our modernization journey?
We need to take a look at the bank's jobs and scheduler setup.
Jobs and schedulers. That sounds a bit like we're talking about the bank's HR department.
Not exactly. In this context, we're talking about all the automated tasks and processes that run behind the scenes.
Okay.
Think of things like processing transactions overnight, generating account statements at the end of the month, or updating interest rates, critical tasks that need to happen on a regular schedule.
So it's about ensuring the system can still handle these automated tasks after it's been modernized.
Precisely. We need to understand how these jobs are scheduled, what dependencies they have on other parts of the system, and make sure they're transitioned smoothly to the new environment. Failing to do so could disrupt critical banking operations.
That makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
So we've got security, automated tasks. What's next on the list?
It's time to talk about documentation and user training.
Okay, I have to admit, documentation and training don't exactly sound like the most thrilling topics.
Right.
Why are they so important in this whole modernization process?
You can have the most technologically advanced system in the world, but if no one knows how to use it, it's practically useless. Imagine launching a sleek new online banking platform, but your customers can't figure out how to log in or make a simple transfer.
You're right, that would be a disaster.
Yeah.
So what kind of documentation and training are we talking about here?
We need to assess the existing application documentation, training materials for developers who will be maintaining the system, user manuals for bank employees, everything. And we need to identify any gaps or areas where things are unclear, because those gaps can lead to confusion, errors, and frustration down the line.
So it's not just about having documentation, it's about having good documentation.
Precisely. The goal is to make sure that knowledge about the system, both for the people who build and maintain it and the people who use it, is preserved and updated throughout the modernization process.
It's like providing a comprehensive user manual for a brand new gadget. You want to make sure everyone knows how to use all the features and get the most out of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light at the end of this modernization tunnel. What's next?
Time to put the system through its paces with a good old-fashioned test cases review.
Test cases. Is this where we unleash a bunch of interns on the system and see what breaks?
It's tempting, but not quite. This is about reviewing the existing test cases for different parts of the system to understand how thoroughly it's been tested in the past.
Okay. So why is this important for modernization? Wouldn't we just create new test cases for the new system?
While we will need new test cases for the new functionalities, reviewing existing ones can highlight potential weaknesses or areas that might be easily overlooked during the transition. By understanding how the old system was tested, we can design more robust and comprehensive tests for the new one.
Right.
We want to make sure it's at least as reliable as the old one, if not more so.
Smart. It's like learning from the mistakes of the past to build a better future. All right, what else is on our to-do list?
No modernization project is complete without a thorough examination of the release management process.
Release management. That sounds a bit intimidating, like something out of a high-stakes tech thriller.
It's not as dramatic as it sounds, but it is a critical piece of the puzzle. This is about understanding how the bank manages changes to the system, how often updates are released, and their track record for smooth transitions.
So if the system is a finely tuned machine, this is about making sure we don't throw a wrench in the gears when we try to upgrade it.
Exactly. A well-defined release management process is crucial for minimizing disruption and ensuring a smooth transition to the modernized system. We want to avoid any downtime or service interruptions, especially for something as critical as a banking system.
It's like carefully orchestrating a complex dance, making sure every step flows smoothly into the next to avoid anyone tripping over their own feet. Sounds essential. All right, what's next on this checklist? We're getting close to the finish line here.
Next up, production incidents.
Production incidents. That doesn't sound good. Should I be worried?
Don't worry, we're just doing our due diligence. This is about looking at the history of problems or outages the system has experienced in the past.
So like reading through a digital accident report for the system?
Exactly. We want to understand what kind of issues have come up, how severe they were, what caused them, and how they were resolved. This helps us identify potential risks and build a more resilient system.
So it's about learning from past mistakes, understanding what went wrong, and taking steps to prevent those mistakes from happening again in the new system.
Exactly. It's much easier to prevent a problem from happening in the first place than it is to fix it after the fact, especially when you're talking about something as critical as a banking system.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Okay, we're in the home stretch now. What's the last item on our modernization checklist?
The final piece of the puzzle is logging and monitoring.
Logging. Like what you do with trees.
I assure you, no trees will be harmed in the process of modernizing this banking system. We're talking about digital logs records of what's happening within the system, especially when something goes wrong.
Ah, so like a digital trail of breadcrumbs to help you figure out what happened if or maybe when something goes haywire.
Precisely. A robust logging and monitoring system is essential for quickly identifying and resolving issues, which is crucial for a modern banking system.
And hopefully helps prevent those heart-stopping moments when the system goes down unexpectedly. Okay, we've made it through the entire checklist. That was quite a journey. Anything else we need to consider before we move on from this modernization marathon?
There's one more crucial aspect to cover: stakeholders.
Stakeholders.
Sure.
Right? Because no project is complete without considering the needs and perspectives of everyone involved, right?
Exactly. Stakeholders are anyone who has a vested interest in the system, both internal and external. This could include bank employees, customers, regulators, anyone who relies on the system to do their job or manage their finances.
Okay, so why are stakeholders so important in the grand scheme of modernization?
Because understanding their needs and perspectives is essential for ensuring the new system actually meets the needs of the people who will be using it. We need to make sure it's user-friendly, efficient, and addresses their concerns.
So it's not just about shiny new tech. It's about making sure that tech actually works for the people who rely on it every day, which, let's be honest, is kind of the whole point of technology in the first place.
Precisely. Technology should serve people, not the other way around.
Well said. So we've explored the ins and outs of this modernization checklist, covering everything from interfaces to stakeholders. Where do we go from here? So we've explored the ins and outs of this modernization checklist, covering everything from interfaces to stakeholders. Where do we go from here? It feels like we've just scratched the surface of this complex topic.
It's true. Modernizing core banking systems is a massive undertaking. But this checklist provides a framework for approaching the process strategically, understanding the why behind the technology, and anticipating potential challenges before they derail the entire project.
It's like you've handed us a compass and a map for navigating a dense jungle. We might not know exactly what creatures we'll encounter along the way, but at least we have a sense of direction.
Exactly. And speaking of navigating the unknown, this expert brought up a fascinating point regarding the potential role of AI in this whole process.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. AI in banking modernization. Is that even a thing yet, or are we talking about some futuristic sci-fi scenario?
It's definitely more than just sci-fi. We're already seeing AI being used in various aspects of banking, and its role in modernization is rapidly evolving. Imagine AI vulnerabilities that humans might miss, or even automatically generating documentation.
That would be a game changer, especially when you consider how much time and effort goes into understanding those old systems. It's like having an army of digital assistants helping to translate ancient manuscripts.
Precisely. AI could dramatically accelerate the process of analyzing code, identifying dependencies, and flagging potential risks. This could free up human experts to focus on more strategic decisions and fine-tuning the modernization process.
So AI could help us tackle those unknown unknowns we talked about earlier, those hidden risks lurking in the depths of the code.
Exactly. AI is particularly good at detecting patterns and anomalies in large datasets, which makes it well suited for analyzing complex code bases. It could potentially identify those ticking time bombs hidden within the code before they have a chance to go off.
That sounds incredibly valuable, especially when you're talking about systems that are responsible for handling people's money. Are there any other ways AI could be used in this modernization process?
Absolutely. Imagine AI-powered tools that help migrate data, test new systems, or even personalize the customer experience. AI could analyze customer data to tailor products and services, identify potential fraud in real time, or even automate customer service interactions.
That sounds both impressive and a little unnerving. I can see the appeal of a more personalized banking experience, but there's also something about AI making decisions about my money that makes me a bit uneasy.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or does AI always seem to come with a side of what could possibly go wrong?
It's a valid concern. AI is a powerful tool, but it's not without its risks. One of the biggest challenges is ensuring that AI systems are developed and deployed responsibly and ethically. We need to make sure they're not perpetuating existing biases, discriminating against certain groups, or being used for malicious purposes.
So it's not just about the technical aspects of implementing AI, it's also about considering the ethical implications.
Exactly. As AI plays a larger role in banking and other industries, we need to have thoughtful conversations about how to harness its power responsibly while mitigating potential risks.
That sounds like a conversation we could have an entire deep dive on. But for now, let's bring it back to core banking modernization. What are some key takeaways from our exploration today?
I think the biggest takeaway is that modernizing these systems is not just about swapping out old code for new code. It's about understanding the why behind the technology, mitigating risks, and ensuring a smooth transition that benefits both the bank and its customers.
It's about building a system that's not only technologically advanced, but also aligned with the bank's business goals and the needs of the people who rely on it every day.
Precisely. It's about creating a banking experience that is secure, efficient, and user-friendly for everyone involved.
Well said. This deep dive has been a whirlwind of information, but in the best possible way. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the invisible world of banking technology and the challenges of bringing it into the modern age.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a fascinating field that's constantly evolving, and I think we're just scratching the surface of what's possible.
I have a feeling you're right. This definitely feels like the beginning of a much larger conversation, especially as AI starts to play a larger role. But for now, I think I need some time to digest all this information and maybe check my own bank account just to make sure those ones and zeros are still behaving themselves.
I think that's a great idea. Until next time, happy banking!
And happy learning, everyone.